Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let us get started. Investors struggle to cope with mounting uncertainties on trade and economic fronts, and the latest attack from the White House on the Federal Reserve made the situation more dire. Donald Trump trained his attacks on Federal Reserve, the independent U.S. government institution, and demanded that the Fed chair lower rates and urged him to resign in the most uncouth tone. The unprofessional tone of Trump's attacks and unbridled desire to meddle with the key pillar of the U.S. financial infrastructure rattled not only investors on Wall Street but around the globe. In less than 3 hours of the announcements, benchmark indices dropped 6% and were set to extend losses, forcing the U.S. president to stop his attacks and back down from his demands. The fire the Fed chief added to one more level of unpredictability, as investors worried who or what else could be targeted next to satisfy one man's ego. On campaign trails, Donald Trump promised to end inflation, improve economy, create wealth for Americans, and end war in Ukraine on the first day in the office. Instead, after 100 days, we got tariff-linked price hikes, economy barreling towards a recession, and stock market wiping out about $6 trillion of wealth. Moreover, innocent people, including children, are getting killed in Ukraine every day, with no end in sight of Russia's war. Let us review this week's key economic data, and we begin with the U.S. Housing market remains one of the bright spots in the U.S. economy, but higher prices are making homes less affordable for many. Existing home sales declined 5.9% from the previous month and fell 2.4% from a year ago to an annual rate of 4 million units in March. Homes available for sale increased nearly 20% from a year ago to 1.3 million units, sitting at a 4-month supply at the current rate of selling. The median existing home price for all housing types in March was $403,700, up 2.7% from 1 year ago, and all 4 regions registered price increases. Across the Atlantic, passenger car sales declined for the 3rd consecutive month amid a deteriorating economic growth outlook and weakening export environment. Passenger car sales in the European Union decreased 0.2% from a year ago to 1.03 million in March, following a 3.4% fall in February. Overall registration in the first quarter decreased 1.9% from a year ago to 2.8 million units. Hybrid electric vehicles surged, capturing 35.5% of the market and remaining the preferred choice among European Union consumers. Meanwhile, the combined market share of petrol and diesel cars decreased to 38.3%, down from 48.3% in the period a year ago, and battery electric car share rose to 15.2%. The UK's retail sales rose more than expected in March. Retail sales in the UK rose 2.6% from a year ago and advanced 0.4% from the previous month in March. Favorable weather conditions supported a 3.7% rise in sales in apparel sales, but food store sales declined 1.3%. Excluding fuel, retail sales rose 0.5% from the previous month. In other economic news from around the world, U.S. durable goods orders surged in March, driven by a rise in commercial aircraft orders. China held its loan prime rate steady, and the People's Bank of China weakened the yuan to 7.208 against the dollar, below the psychologically critical level of 7.20. Tokyo area's overall and core inflation accelerated in April, setting the stage for the Bank of Japan to increase rates later in the year amid mounting evidence of sustainable inflation. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury eased 1 basis point and fell to 4.29% amid hopes of easing of ongoing trade tensions ignited by the policies of the Trump administration. Texas crude oil prices fell 3% to $63 a barrel as oil traders hope for the end of Russia's war in Ukraine and a possible increase in the supply from the OPEC Plus nations. Natural gas prices in Europe fell 10% to about 32 euros per megawatt hour amid slowing demand from key customers in Asia and rising supply in the shipping ports in Europe. The euro edged slightly lower to $1.14 as concerns over the independence of the Federal Reserve eased, and the dollar recovered grounds after the U.S. President said he has intention of dismissing Fed Chair Jerome Powell. The yen weakened to 143 against the dollar as the U.S. currency recovered amid hopes of possible de-escalation or trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Let us shift our attention to major stock markets in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite soared amid hopes of easing trade tensions and tech earnings optimism, and the U.S. president was forced to back down from his attempts at compromising the independence of the Federal Reserve. The European market extended gains for the third consecutive week, driven by positive earnings. The Nikkei 225 stock average extended gains for the third consecutive week, tracking gains on Wall Street amid optimism about the U.S.-Japan trade negotiations. Hong Kong and China indices advanced amid growing expectations that policymakers may announce additional stimulus measures to counter negative impact of high U.S. tariffs. Indian market indices extended gains for the second consecutive week, but mixed earnings kept the advances in check. We now shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings updates from leading companies last week. Alphabet, the parent company of Google's search engine, reported better than expected quarterly results. And this played a key role in lifting the stock market's indices on Friday. Tesla Incorporated reported a decline in earnings in the first quarter, driven by a fall in demand for its electric vehicles and a reputational hit. Intuitive Surgical posted strong quarterly results but issued cautious guidance amid tariff uncertainty. Pulte Group, the home builder, completed construction of fewer homes in the first quarter, and sales slumped amid rising building costs and waning demand. GE Aerospace and GE Vernova posted strong quarterly results and issued positive guidance for the current fiscal year. Moody's reported strong first-quarter earnings, and the bond rating agency issued positive guidance. Procter & Gamble raised its dividend despite the decrease in net sales in the third quarter. VeriSign issued positive guidance after the domain name service provider said sales and earnings in the first quarter jumped. The Aéroports de Paris, the group that manages several airports in France, said sales jumped in the first quarter, driven by traffic growth and increased airport fees. Kering, the parent company of Gucci, said first quarter sales declined as the Gucci brand owner closed a number of stores in different locations. Renault Group missed analyst expectations, although sales in Europe advanced. Nestle said sales in the first quarter increased, but sales in the Americas remained flat. Carrefour Group reported higher sales in their first quarter, driven by growth in Brazil and Spain, while sales in France dropped nearly 2%. In the week ahead, investors in the U.S. are looking forward to the release of job openings and non-farm payroll reports. In addition, manufacturing surveys and GDP growth rate and consumer spending reports are also on schedule. On the earnings front, investors anticipate results from Apple, Microsoft, Meta Platforms, Qualcomm, Caterpillar, Amazon, Nucor, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Chevron, ExxonMobil as well. In Europe, investors are looking ahead to the release of Eurozone consumer confidence and inflation expectations and manufacturing business activities in France, Germany, the UK, and the Eurozone. The UK, Germany, and Spain's retail sales are also scheduled for the week ahead. In the UK, nationwide house price index is expected to provide insights into the market trend after recent tax changes. On the earnings front in Europe, markets are looking ahead to the results from Schneider Electric, Deutsche Börse, AstraZeneca, Novartis, HSBC Holdings, BP plc, Deutsche Bank, Porsche, Airbus, Shell plc, London Stock Exchange, Lloyd Banking, and BASF. In Asia, markets are anticipating Japan's interest rate decisions, and China's surveys on business activities and industrial profit. The Bank of Japan is likely to hold rates for now, but the bank may signal hikes in the coming months. India will release annual industrial output report on Monday. Japan is expected to report on retail sales and industrial production on Tuesday. Housing starts and construction orders are on tap on Wednesday, and consumer confidence and private manufacturing activities survey are scheduled on Thursday. On the earnings front in Asia, market anticipate results from Hitachi, Mitsubishi Electric, Sinuk, Samsung Electronics, Foxconn, Tata Power, Fast Retailing, Taiwan Mobile, and China Steel Corp. You can review daily U.S. and global financial markets news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on rodera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That is all for today, and we will see you next week.